We've all seen that protester, the picture of that protester wearing the Camp Auschwitz T-shirt, and have heard that neo-Nazis were involved in that melee. But how much of a factor was anti-Semitism among those who took part in the riot? Well, an analysis by the American Jewish Congress conducted after the attack of some 24,000 right-wing Twitter accounts showed that anti-Semitism was pervasive throughout both the in-person and online activity surrounding the attack. 6% of those users engaged in insurrectionist discussion, and 40% of them were associated with the anti-Semitic QAnon movement. Well, joining us now for more is Joe Rubin, Executive Director of the American Jewish Congress, and he's also a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State. He joins us from Chevy Chase, Maryland. And Joe, let's go in a little more detail about that analysis that the American Jewish Congress conducted. I mean, some of the specific findings that you had.
Thanks for having me, Caleb. And the way you framed it is correct. The protests that led to the insurrection last week, violence and anti-Semitism were the feature, not the bug of that insurrection. And we saw in account after account references to anti-Semitic attacks, to hate attacks, be it the Christ Church, be it to showing white power imagery, Nazi symbology, you name it. It was a Wild West, a mixture of every possible anti-Semitic meme and threat that one could see. And this happened during the attack and after the attack on the Capitol and the days leading up to and after. And it's really quite depressing as an American Jew to see this and to see Nazi flags being paraded through the American Capitol, really a detestable moment and something that was central to the ideology behind this insurrection.
Right, and there has been some discussion about how much anti-Semitism plays as a factor in, for example, movements like the Proud Boys or the QAnon conspiracy, because it's not direct in the way that previous anti-Semitic movements. It almost seems to more by a kind of implication or by targeting specific Jewish figures. Certainly, Senator Chuck Schumer of New York would be a pretty good example of that.
Well, what we have to be careful of is to not normalize anti-Semitic attacks and attacks against Jewish politicians. In the case of Senator Schumer, John Ossoff, when he was a candidate running in Georgia, his opponent used an elongated nose for him in a political ad. We can't accept any kind of statements that are not directly Nazi symbols of Jews being murdered. And I think we have to accept the fact that over the last several years, we've seen an increase in white nationalism and white supremacist activity going back to Charlottesville and the days before that as well, where themes and arguments against Jewish control, Jews in the media, Jews in politics are pervasive. And it really came to a head at the insurrection last week and that attack on the Capitol, where across the board, anti-Semitic activity on Twitter was lighting up, that this was a moment to stand up for essentially the president and the white supremacist agenda and to reject Jews and to reject minorities and to reject others who had legitimate participation in the democratic process here in the United States.
And how much is this, do you feel that the politicians in Washington, presumably especially in the Republican Party, which is some members of the Republican Party have expressed some support for some of the sentiments of those that demonstrated. I'm not saying, of course, specifically for those who went in the Capitol, that you would like to see them speak out more, at least on those specific elements?
I really do. And I think that we have to be very clear here. There has been an erosion in the U.S. government and under Donald Trump's leadership in any surveillance of white supremacist activity. Essentially, we've had a free-for-all. And as a result of that, we've seen, according to FBI statistics, dramatic increases in the amounts of anti-Semitic incidents and the hate crimes. And there really hasn't been a commitment to fighting anti-Semitism here at home. And that's very disturbing because American Jews across the board, we are American. We want to feel secure and safe in our country. And yet our government And our leader, President Trump, Donald Trump, has been essentially using anti-Semitic entities as the base of his political motivation, his political operation. He has not called them out. Recall during the presidential campaign when he did not denounce the Proud Boys, he essentially told them to stand by. Well, this is the result of standing by. The result is a riot at the Capitol, 5 people dead, and a threat to the core essence of our democracy.
Right. Joel, if for a minute I could just ask you, draw more on your experience in Washington and serving for Democratic administrations. Do you think that the Democrats in Congress are going to see the impeachment process through at least to a full trial and vote in the Senate, which will have to take place after President Trump leaves office?
Yeah, I do, Kalev. I think that the Democrats are giving a 24-hour warning shot to Vice President Pence to invoke the 25th Amendment and move President Trump out, or tomorrow they'll go to impeachment on Wednesday and then sit on it for a while. There's a lot of discussion about the timing of it, but there is overwhelming disgust and contempt for what just took place last week and really for the past several months of delegitimization of American democracy that President Trump has led. And many Republicans, as your colleague noted, many cabinet officials have quit as well. Many are disgusted as well. And so I think Democrats are going to push this through in the House and then let it sit for a while, move through to inauguration, get Joe Biden into office, and find the right time to continue the trial in the Senate.
All right. Well, it certainly looks like the first few months of the Biden administration will have plenty of action, both, of course, in the White House and in the Congress.
Absolutely.
Joel Rubin, Executive Director of the American Jewish Congress, thank you for joining us on The Rundown.
Thanks, Cliff.